Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 380, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, June 9th, 2025. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you had an amazing weekend, and you have an awesome week ahead. Got a lot to get to today, but first, some of you may remember a while back, I explained the sign-off I do to every episode. Some of you probably already recognize the sign-off of good night and good luck. And I explained the background to it and, why I thought it was, a fun sign-off. The admiration that I had for the newscaster that used to say it, Edward R. Murrow. Now, this is well before my time, but I became aware of him because there was a movie that came out, I think in like 2005, called Good Night and Good Luck, after that signature sign-off phrase he did at the end of every broadcast. But that phrase meant a lot during a particular period of U.S. history involving McCarthyism and the bravery he showed to he would have commentary sometimes at the end of the news, and we'd give commentary, and there's a few famous ones that he did. In any event, I'm not going to get all back into it, but the movie, which starred George Clooney and he directed it as well, was turned into a play, and that play has been going on, I believe, on Broadway. I wouldn't see why it wouldn't be with George Clooney starring. Now he's starring as Murrow in the play. He did not in the movie. But obviously it's one of our best actors. Is getting great reviews. Well, CNN, whatever your thoughts on them are, they did a live broadcast this weekend. So I recorded it. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm excited for it. And I just wanted to share that. If you hear me do that little sign off and why I do that, if you didn't know, and if you're interested, I'm sure you can see it streaming. I don't know how long, but on places where you get live TV, whether that's Hulu, YouTube, or wherever. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it because the movie was really good. And the background story is something important to me and something, that I've looked into over the years. And yeah, so obviously just wanted to pass that along. Other than that, we had some thunderstorms roll through on Sunday. I hope everyone's doing fine. If you lost power, hopefully it wasn't for very long. The storm in my area just cleared up as I'm recording this not too long ago. So far, it seems like there aren't any, reports of anything really bad happening. Yes, power outages, but no damage or anything like that I've heard of. Nothing significant has hit the news anyway. So hope everyone did fine through the storm. And without any further delay, let's get into the latest news. All right. I had a feeling that eventually we would learn some more about that ICE raid that happened in the Somerville area. And, even though I said, well, look, we're just basing what we know so far on what federal officials and local officials are saying. And by officials, I mean like police officers, the Charleston County Sheriff, whoever was representing ICE at these press conferences. And I say, there's not much journalists can do at this time, is this just happened. And all they can really do is report what officials are saying, especially since they weren't releasing really any strong details, including the people's names that were arrested. A handful have come out since then, but there's still not a lot of details. Well, we're getting a little bit more, and as expected, the true story is, not exactly necessarily what we were told. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't, find people they were looking for. It certainly seems that way. It wasn't just a complete blind thing. They had specific targets, it seems, and they were able to round them up. And based on what they're charged with, or I don't even know if charged is the right word, because who knows where these people are and what's happening. But there's a pretty serious crimes that we're being told that some of them had committed. And of course, if those are true, they deserve, to face punishment for that. But that includes due process, that they shouldn't just be deported. And we shouldn't just accept that because federal officials are telling us people are charged with certain crimes that, oh, yeah, they must be. It's a done deal. Who cares if they're deported? We've seen why, because people have been mistakenly deported. It's reported on the news constantly. Not just the fact that people are mistakenly deported, but that's what due process is supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to, face your crimes in some fashion in our court system. or alleged crimes, I should say. So in any event, we're still not getting a lot, and it's been about a week, I think a week on Sunday, actually. We're not getting a lot of details from federal, state, and local law enforcement, other than the fact that they took 80 people from this 24-hour nightclub in this large sting that they did, and there's very few records associated with the operation that have been made public. Most of those documents, in fact, never will be made public, according to an Immigration and Customs Enforcement Public Affairs Officer, Lindsay Williams. Now, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is ICE, so that's where the acronym comes from. Williams said, "There's a mountain of paperwork. You won't get it." I mean, that's pretty clear, and that was talking to the press during a press conference. So what we do know, the majority of people rounded up. It was about 3 a.m., and it was on June 1st. So yes, a week ago Sunday. They were detained for civil issues with their immigration status, but the officials say the bust also resulted in a handful of criminal arrests, including at least 2 people accused of being, quote, high-level cartel members, and 1 person allegedly wanted for international murder. So again, very serious charges. If they are gonna, how it should work is they should face these charges in court. And right now, we have no idea where these folks are. In some cases, we don't know who they are. And honestly, we barely know where they are. Apparently, they're in an ICE holding facility in rural Georgia, at least last week we're told, by the officials. And as I said, they've been pretty tight-lipped about even releasing the names of those arrested, which seems very suspect. If you want to make a big show of making these arrests and getting all these criminals, okay, you made the show, but you should release their names, and that's kind of part of the process. So now journalists can do their job, or members of the public if they want to, and search for these records and charges and all that kind of stuff, and they're just not providing that information. Now, so there's that side of things. On the other side, a woman did speak up about this incident that happened in the nightclub. By the way, the nightclub's called El Alamo. And she was pushing back against some of the descriptions that were coming from law enforcement, saying that the night became one of, quote, fear and humiliation, end quote. And she made these accusations and assertions during a June 6th news conference. The woman's name is Alejandra de la Vega, and she has lived in the U.S. since 2001, graduated from Fort Dorchester High School, and recently earned a master's degree. And she said she was at the club on the night of the raid. But she went on, she's telling reporters that instead of a night of fun, it turned into that fear and humiliation. She also, basically, her report was she was in the bathroom. When she got out, officers came storming in. She said there was chaos. People were screaming, running. There was no explanation given about what was going on. She said that her and her friend, both of whom are transgender women, were immediately approached by officers. She said that they were repeatedly questioned about their identities, even after they provided officers with a driver's license. She also noted that her friend is a Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, recipient. The DACA program allows for people brought to the U.S. as children to apply for and renew 2-year permits that allow them to work and live in the country. De La Vega said she was fortunate to have a picture of her permanent resident card, otherwise she could have been in very big trouble because officials told her that she needed to carry it with her at all times. Now, okay, you carry your driver's license around, but a big problem De La Vega mentioned is if that card is somehow lost, it can take months and a lot of money to replace it if it were to end up being lost. According to reporting for the Post and Courier, and they checked on the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services website, a permanent resident card, also known as a green card, costs at least $415. So, yeah, not exactly the cheapest option available. She said that officers were separating people by skin color and whether they had visible tattoos. Those with tattoos, she said, were questioned about whether they had any gang affiliations and were then photographed as if they were suspects in some sort of crime. Now, Lindsay Williams, who I mentioned before, the spokesperson for ICE, and this incident, she's the one at the beginning who said you're not getting the paperwork. They called the accusation of profiling categorically false. So the officials say that they weren't separating people by race or tattoos and so on and so forth. A person who was there claims they did. So We don't know. It's a he said, she said at this point. De La Vega said that they were held at the club for 2 hours and officers initially pointed guns at them as if they were criminals. She went on to say no one should have to live in fear, especially for going out to just to dance and be in the community and have fun. And she went on to say, I didn't see a cartel like everybody's saying. I saw joy, people dancing and laughing, enjoying the weekend. I saw hardworking men and women, people who had just finished a long week out and trying to enjoy a night. So a little bit more details, one coming from someone who was actually there and not an official. So that's, I knew there'd be some info that would come out. And again, it sounds like perhaps the truth of what happened is somewhere in the middle. It's very likely that there are indeed people that were there that have been, whether federal or local law enforcement has been looking into, and they've, it seems, rounded up at least a few pretty dangerous criminals. Now, the trouble with that is how do we know that without any evidence being presented, without any details being presented, and without this going, the traditional route that we're used to when it comes to due process. So, again, truth probably somewhere in the middle. It's probably not as cut and dry and, as federal officials, especially, are trying to make it. And the fact that they will release pretty much nothing about these folks kind of lends credence to that theory. And of course, De La Vega speaking also kind of lends some credence to that theory as well. Raids like this, I'm sure, are not easy. I'm sure they're scary for officials and obviously scary for anyone who is present somewhere. And it certainly sucks if you're a completely innocent person who just happens to be in a club that some alleged criminals are in that are being tracked by law enforcement. I get that when police go in there, they don't necessarily know who's who and who's, a threat to them or not, because they don't know every single person that's in there. And so I know that pulling guns and stuff certainly is scary, certainly seems unnecessary. But I know, these guys, the police have to protect themselves. You never know what's going to happen, especially if they're being told by, whoever, that they're going after dangerous criminals. So there's some parts I'm like, hey, that really sucks. And I wish you didn't have to go through that. But given and again, I'm basing this on what little we know, but that kind of stuff, hey, that really sucks. But what else were police supposed to do in that situation? Now, some of the other stuff, breaking them up by race, which, kind of shows, if that is what happened, what this whole immigration crackdown we've been talking about, what exactly is really going on there. So again, a very complicated situation, because it also has to do with people who may not have the legal right to live here. And so although it sucks they might have got swept up in this, technically they're breaking the law. You know how this goes. It's a very complicated thing. I like to err on the side of humanity. But as expected, the story that we were told is probably not completely accurate, or at least is, maybe been, they've made it seem a little more flowery and everything went great and we got all these horrible criminals. Nothing bad happened to anyone innocent. Everything's great. And well, we kind of assumed that was probably false. So again, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And I have a feeling we're going to learn more about the situation as time goes on. A scary incident happened on Friday afternoon. Charleston police officers were investigating a stabbing that happened at a downtown Charleston restaurant. At approximately 2:45 p.m., officers responded to Fuel Cantina, which is on Rutledge Avenue. For those who have been here a while, it's across from where Hominy Grill used to be. And the report was an employee was stabbed by a coworker during an altercation. The suspect fled the scene before officers arrived. The victim was taken to the area hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, so that's good news. However, as of this recording, no arrests have been made, so the employee that fled apparently has not been located. But certainly a scary situation that thankfully wasn't any worse. Remember that that Dockside community, condos near the harbor that had to be evacuated? Well, some of the owners of, who lived on that property, or, if they rented it out or whatever, but some of the owners are suing the city of Charleston after they were forced to leave their homes within 24 hours back in February. The lawsuit says that the owners were all told to evacuate no later than 5 p.m. on February 28th, and there was no hearing, and that was kind of it. Like, this is what you have to do. The lawsuit further claims there's little direct evidence that their townhomes, which are on the same stretch of property as the Dockside condominiums, were dangerous. So there's condominiums, there's some other residents in that area, and a lot of them were forced to evacuate. But in addition to some of these other findings, they said, well, some nearby properties, including the International African American Museum and the City of Charleston pump station, were not forced to evacuate. So if there's a potential for these buildings to collapse, they're alleging, well, why wouldn't you make other people evacuate because they could be in danger? Now, city officials at the time said a potential structure issue stemmed from a contractor inspection of the Dockside towers in 2022. The building was not deemed unsafe at that time, but officials said that an inspection led to a more in-depth investigation, which led the building being deemed unsafe for residents. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 11 townhome owners and claims that the city never cited any authority when it forced the owners to leave. In a letter stating the tower was unsafe, never mentioned the adjacent townhomes. So it was the towers that were the problem. You may remember that was the first announcement. And then these condos after that are nearby, they were forced to evacuate because there was concerns about the towers, but there was no information that their particular building was unsafe. The lawsuit also claims that findings from an engineering firm never described the townhomes as being dangerous. It also claims that while the townhome occupants were forced to evacuate, like I said, those other buildings were not, so they don't quite understand why they are seen as they're in an area of danger, but these other places are not. And the lawsuit requests that a jury trial, they request that they have a jury trial on this matter. So I was wondering what was going to happen. I remember at the time I was like, hey, better safe than sorry. And, kudos to the city. That's a tough decision. I'm sure they didn't take it lightly. Well, maybe I was wrong in that assumption. Wouldn't be the first time. And maybe they're not as dangerous as they seem. So this is going to play out, and we'll certainly, learn more about this, and I'll keep you updated. Meanwhile, there may be a pretty famous hotel brand coming to Charleston. I mean, it seems like a done deal at this point. And in fact, Four Seasons had some of their officials say last week that plans to introduce a new luxury hotel and private residence in Charleston have been confirmed. This will be the first ever presence of a Four Seasons in South Carolina in any part of their brand. The Four Seasons Hotel and Residence Charleston will be the name, and it'll be situated in the city's historic district, offering 139 guest rooms and 36 branded residents within walking distance of many popular attractions downtown, including the King Street shopping area, art district, French Quarter, et cetera, et cetera. Four Seasons officials said completion on the hotel is expected in 2028, so it's going to be a little while before anybody can go to the hotel or purchase one of those, by the way, very pricey residence homes. I'll have more on that in a moment. The location is where the former Days Inn Hotel was, which was, it's right near Toast, that restaurant for those familiar. So that's where it'll be. The hotel will include 4 restaurants and bars, an outdoor pool with private cabanas, and 7,000 square feet of event space. Some additional amenities will include a full-service spa and a fitness center. As for the residents, they'll range from 2,000 square feet with 2-bedroom and 2.5-bath floor plans to 3,700 square feet, which are 5 bedrooms and 3.5-bath floor plans. So they have a little bit of a range there. And the prices, if you're wondering, they start at $5 million, and homeowners will have access to in-resident dining, housekeeping, and concierge services, all managed by the hotel. I mean, that sounds pretty sweet to me. I like hotels, and if I can get all those services, but have like a bigger space, I wish I had that $5 million, let me tell you. So yeah, we got a few years, about 3 years till it's expected to be completed. But unless something unforeseen happens, Four Seasons is on its way to downtown Charleston. James Beard award-winning pitmaster Rodney Scott, of course, of Rodney Scott's barbecue fame. He's got, I think, 5 restaurants now around the Southeast. But another big piece of news for him, he's teamed up with Target to bring some of his products to shelves through a collaboration with Good and Gather, which is Target's in-house line of food products. The 12 items are designed to enhance if you had your own at-home barbecue, say. Products include Carolina-style sauces, honey cornbread, there's mac and cheese, pork rinds, baked beans, iced tea, and more. The products are also available to order online, so if you don't want to go into Target, you can get some of these Rodney Scott products delivered to you. So I thought that was kind of cool. Good for Rodney Scott and his continued success. Just seeing, growing from working at his family's establishment in Hemingway, South Carolina, to opening his own restaurant in Charleston, and now growing and growing. Seeing his rise has been really awesome. And lastly, some more kudos to give out to a South Carolina, well, a resident at one point in South Carolina anyway. That is former South Carolina Stingrays player and coach Spencer Carberry. He won the Jack Adams Award on Saturday after his second season coaching the NHL's Washington Capitals. This makes him the first coach ever to win Coach of the Year awards in the NHL, AHL, and ECHL. The latter of which is where the Stingrays are, where they play. That's their league. AHL would be a step above, and obviously NHL is the cream of the crop as far as professional hockey in America. Carberry played for the Stingrays in his last two seasons as a player before he ended up joining the coaching staff. Eventually, he was named the team's sixth head coach back in 2011. He won the John Brophy Coach of the Year award in 2013 and 14 with the Stingrays. He then left South Carolina to coach in the OHL and then the AHL before returning to the Capitals farm system. That's where the Stingrays are in, the Washington Capitals. And he ended up coaching the AHL's Hershey Bears. So, he bounced around to a couple of other coaching gigs, including another one in the AHL before coming back to the same system that the Stingrays are in. And yes, the step above the Stingrays is the Hershey Bears in Pennsylvania. When he was there, he won the Louis A.R. Pieri Memorial Award for Coach of the Year in 2020-2021. And then later in 2021, he worked as an assistant coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the NHL before becoming the head coach of the Capitals in May of 2023. The Jack Adams Award is given to the head coach, a judge to have contributed the most to his team's success, and is voted by members of the NHL Broadcasters Association. So hats off to him, from Stingrays player to a coach, winning Coach of the Year with the Stingrays, doing the same with the Hershey Bears in the AHL, and now with the Washington Capitals in the NHL. Pretty impressive. Congrats to him. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll be back with you later this week. Already looking forward to it. And of course, good night and good luck.